might be looking at the parts on the table going, hey, didn't we already do a Ruger Mark Series style build? Yes, we did. But we did a Mark II/Mark III style build. And the interesting thing about the jump from the Mark III to the Mark IV is Ruger completely changed the mechanism for how the upper and the lower interact with one another. They simplified the heck out of it, and so all of the Mark II, Mark III, etc. lowers out there, they don't work with the old uppers and vice versa. So only Mark IV uppers work with Mark IV lowers. Why is that important for this project? Because one of the coolest lowers out there happens to be just for the Mark IV. So this is the Cthulhu lower. Tandemkross did send me this lower, but I hesitate to say they're a sponsor, mostly because they gave it to me, said no strings attached, and peaced out. Sort of similar for Viridian Weapons Tech. They let me pick out this RFX44, but I was the one that decided this was the correct project to use it on. Like and subscribe if you too think easygoing companies that support builders are cool. It's a 2245, so 1911 grip angle style lower, and it's just super cool. I've wanted to use this for a while. I mean, it's about as race gun as you can get when it comes to a Ruger style pistol. So if I wanted to be able to utilize this, I was gonna need to figure out not how to make a Mark IV upper, and I'll explain why in a minute, but how to design and make something that works with Mark IV lowers. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of that statement. The Mark IV is the current edition from Ruger of this style of gun. The reason that's important is there are active patent protections on some of the technologies associated with the Mark IV. So you cannot go and willy-nilly just build yourself a Mark IV. So let's talk about the taboo areas that we cannot and will not go into, because one, we don't want to deal with patent infringement, and two, to be honest, they deserve the protections. They don't last for forever. They will expire, just like the protections that were on the Mark II and the Mark III previously. But they put in the time, the R&D, and the effort, so they should get those protections. So we are going to design something that works with a Mark IV style lower, but we're going to specifically avoid the areas that make the Mark IV unique and patent protected. I highly suggest, if you're going to do this, to sort of understand how patents are written and go read them. They're all publicly available from the US Patent Office, but I'm going to break down the three main areas. And again, this is a high level breakdown, but I'm going to break down the three main areas that Ruger has patent protection and we are going to avoid. So first and foremost, I talked about how they changed the method with which uppers and lowers attached on the Mark IV. That's why on a Mark IV takeoff barrel like this, you're going to see that shape that we did not see on our Mark II, Mark III build. And that's because this clicks into a front section, whether you're on a Cthulhu or a traditional Mark IV lower from Ruger. It's the same at the front. However, where the patent protection lies is they have a button that you press in the back, and the patent specifically protects the ability to use a sliding button mechanism as the latching and unlatching of the rear of the upper to the lower. So you'll notice we are using a lower that does not have a button mechanism. We're going to be using a lower that has a screw, the set screw here, that is used to lock everything in place. The second place that they have patent protection is actually in their barrel technology. It reads basically as a type of barrel that has a sleeved inner section. It's very specific on how that functions. But because of that, we're going to use a traditional style barrel. We're not using that fancy sleeved stuff. We're using, minus that cut there, this could be a barrel taken off of a Mark II or a Mark III. So we're staying traditional on our barrel style. And then the last area that they have patent protection is actually what's called a design patent. And again, it has to do with the barrels. They have these like vents of a very specific shape that are design patent protected. But again, by using a traditional style barrel, and not making our own barrel, obviously, that helps, we can stay away from that. Like I said, that is a very large overview of a deep rabbit hole that you can go down in understanding patent law, as well as understanding Ruger's specific patents that relate to the Mark IV. But just understand, like I said, they deserve their patent protection. They put in the effort, so we're not going to infringe on that. And that's why I'm saying this isn't a Mark IV build, because it's not. This is what I'm going to call a hybrid Mark series build. It's using elements from all of the series, essentially, to put together something that works with the lower that I want. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of what's going to set this build and project series apart from our previous one. And I highly recommend that if you have not watched the Mark II, Mark III series that I did earlier this year, go watch that, because there's a lot of information in that applies to this series as well that I'm not going to be repeating. We're just going to focus on what is different. So number one, we're not using a jig. We're not using hand tools. We're not using power tools. If that's what you want to do, go see that series. We're going to use this as an opportunity to CNC mill our upper, and on top of that, we're also going to use this as an opportunity to learn how to use a fourth axis. So if you have access to a fourth axis on your CNC mill, this is where I'll be teaching that skill set. You obviously can do everything we're going to do without a fourth axis. You'll have to get a little creative. It's just going to be something that helps us reduce the number of setups we're going to have to do in order to finish this product. The other thing that's going to be different about this is because we're not using a jig and we are using CNC, we're going to have to design this upper. We're going to go through a little bit of how I designed it. And also, as usual, when we do a CNC project, we're going to go deep into the actual machining, speeds and feeds, all that sort of stuff, the strategies of how we're doing this milling. And there's not just the fourth axis aspect of things, but I'm going to be doing this out of a material we've never used before. This is bronze. Specifically, this is a type of bronze referred to as bearing bronze. And the reason we're going to be using this is, one, I just kind of like the color. I don't think that difference like that stays when you mill it. So it'll be more of a traditional bronze when we're finished. But I do like the color. And bearing bronze has that name because it's got great lubricity. And the reason that's important to me is there is a bolt that reciprocates inside this upper. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we used a material that had naturally high lubricity, like bearing bronze? So that is why we are using this particular material. The other thing that I think is going to be really fun about this is right now my thoughts on the finish that we're going to use here is I will probably try and figure out settings on my fiber laser, again with the fourth axis, to be able to kind of do tentacles that crawl up out of the lower and wrap around the upper. I mean, we've got a Cthulhu lower. Wouldn't it be cool if we kind of stuck with that theme? So we'll be looking at doing some fourth axis laser work for this build as well. The last thing I want to discuss is working with raw materials. So in the last series, I used a pre-dimensioned blank in order to do our build. This time, because I'm using a exotic material like this bearing bronze, I don't have that luxury. I had to buy it raw. And a lot of times when you buy raw metal, this may be sold as 1 inch by 3/4 inch inner diameter, but they're going to have tolerance specs. In this case, all of the specs said that it's either going to be too large in the outer or too small in the inner. And they do that so that you can inch up to your actual needs. Now, if we look at the tolerance of this particular piece I got, we are about 40 thousandths of an inch over tolerance in the outer diameter. So we're going to have to turn that down in order to get things to work. So that should be fun. And we are not even 0.7 inches for inner diameter. So there's a lot of material that we're going to have to take off in order to get to the spec that we are looking for to actually start making our upper. So in this series, we're also going to learn about getting a piece of raw material up to the stage where it's not raw anymore. It actually fits the needs of our build. And so we'll be talking about pre-drilling, reaming, so that we can actually start using this for our build. Let's talk a minute about my optic choice for this particular build. There's three main things that drove it. The first one was aesthetics. I can't remember where, but I saw a picture on some social media site of a big mailbox of death style optic on a Ruger Mark Series pistol, and even this being oversized still, so let's say it's about that long in real life when it finally becomes the pistol, this is still very large compared to the receiver of the build we're making. And this is the small compact mailbox that Viridian makes. This is the 44, not the larger 45. And it still looks like a nice big chunky boy. I don't understand why, but I just thought that that look was super cool, and I knew that that had to be the path that I went down for this particular build. The second reason is, although I do have fairly good eyesight, I do have some astigmatism, which makes red dots look blurry to me. So they end up being like if it's a 3 MOA dot, it'll be like a 6 MOA dot to my eye, and not always perfectly round. So I'll generally just zero it to the center of that blob and call it a day, and it works. Green is supposed to be better. Viridian only makes green dots. They do not make red dots. That's kind of their shtick. And so I thought, heck, if I'm going to try a green dot to see if it's better for my eyes, who better to go with? So that was the second reason. And the third reason is, although it does come with a adapter plate for the acro mount on the bottom, it's an RMR plate, and I also happen to have a low Picatinny mount plate as well. Neither of those are going to help me here unless I put a Picatinny rail. I did a Picatinny rail on my Mark III build. I don't really want that aesthetic a second time, and that's also going to make it so the acro mount, which is made to sit low, would sit super high. So it's going to force me to custom design and mill a adapter plate of some sort. Haven't really thought too deeply about what I'm going to do there. I probably won't use that as an episode in the series, but you will see at the end that I am going to make something custom to actually mount this on with. So that's the drivers. Should be fun. Add some extra aspects to the project.